I suppose, first of all, I should say that I'm Joella Jean Mahoney and that we are at the Coconino Center for the Arts in Flagstaff, Arizona, a very magnificent exhibition space. But I want to show you the latest painting. In fact, I just finished it a couple of weeks ago. And it's something that I have found that when I was painting this, now a little background on how I started my thinking for what would be on the painting. I gave a lecture last month to the Museum of Northern Arizona in their lecture series down in Sedona. And I talked about how my series developed and how the sand dunes of my childhood on Lake Michigan near Chicago, how growing up in the sand dunes until I was 10 impacted my work design-wise and color-wise. And then when I came to the Southwest, the sandstone turns into sand dunes. The sandstone cliffs are, of course, petrified sand dunes, 300 million year old sand dunes. So there's that link, and also the dry lake, the white strip that's way off in the distance in the west of the dry lake, pale like a sand dune, or sometimes around dry lakes there are sand dunes. So the whole idea through the central portion of maybe something that looks sort of like sand dunes, like there might be an ancient riverbed or maybe a little bit of water. And so those shapes, those colors of dunes. Now, also, when I begin a painting like this, I just start painting. And I love yellow. And because yellow is just so life-giving. And it's encouraging, and it cheers me up and whatnot. So I chose that. And pretty far along in the painting, and the other thing is when I work on a painting, I work on it in all directions. So sometimes this was the top, and sometimes that was the bottom and reversed. But I decided to finish it this way in this position, even though it can be shown in any position. The blue, and then I started laying in the little lighter blue over it. And as I was painting it, I had this feeling come up in myself that it felt like my childhood, the happiest part of my childhood. When the summer sky felt like that. And so this feeling came over me of the times in my life, in our lives, all of us, when there's no pain and there's joy and there's a feeling of wholeness and foreverness, that there's no time limit. And I call those the halcyon days, the life without pain. Now, in my childhood, I had a lot of pain, as we all do in our childhood. But this made me feel like the happiest times in my childhood. And so this may be the beginning of a new series, because as I was painting the painting, I had such a strong reaction to it. And sometimes when that happens, that means that a new body of work is coming. And so is it because I'm aging? Is it because I'm looking at my mortality that I'm thinking about youth and the times that were really whole and meaningful and happy? Everything's transitory, isn't it, anyway? So the happiness fades and goes into this and that. And that's another thing about balance, because there's obvious balance here between this big shape and that big shape. And then the importance of the center. all of this gets related to what's going on inside of us too, because painting, all of the arts are about being alive, all of the arts. And we don't know what it's like being dead, so we can only imagine that. But art is about being alive. It's the enactment of the spiritual experience of being alive. And I don't belong to any religion or not, I'm not woo-woo or anything like that, but it is a spiritual experience, a heightened sense of being alive. Well, balance is dynamic, and that is a great lesson to learn from horseback riding, because on the horse has to learn to balance us, and we are always very subtly rebalancing, shifting on the horse, balancing. So balance is dynamic, it's not stasis. And so there's a lot of balance, but when I saw this painting photographed in black and white in the newspaper, I really got to see the space. Now, yellow comes way forward, and it's like a big plane hanging right out here in front of us. And then this slips back in there, and we go up, but then we go in again. And then we go in way down in there. So that I'm having a good time playing with space on a flat surface. So the illusion of three-dimensional space on a flat surface. It does all relate to depth, inner depth, outer depth, whatnot. Okay, so if this is the beginning of maybe a whole new series, then I'll show you what happens when a series goes on, and we'll go to this wall over here. And in my lifetime of painting, I discovered that just by painting. Oh, okay, so this painting leads into the next and into the next. A few years ago, we had a lot of rain in Sedona. And all the dry washes where we were hiking were running. And this painting I started in the parking lot up on Snubbly Hill at the end of the pavement where it ends. And these great folds of the mountains that come down into what's called Bear Wallow. And there are some orange monuments that are there. I rubbed them out. And then this is the Mogollon Rim and the water from the sky coming down and down through the canyon. So I call that painting Runoff. And then I got to thinking, well, what's down way in here? And what's down there is the pour-over. And this is still the inner canyon. And in my books, you can see that the inner canyon is a big series. But a more intimate look at the pour-over and the sensuality of water and the power of it and the beauty of it. And the pool down here is a painting in its own right. So it's really design, isn't it? Everything is design. We make up everything. We design math problems, we design music scores, we design clothing, we design homes, everything is made up in design. So then, from this painting then, I wanted to push this further into design, so the third painting is that. It's the pour-over, but it's taking up more room. And it's about the overwhelming necessity for water. Again, the power of water and the beauty of it. And what's underwater, what's in the inside. And the inner canyon is still here, the light of the inner canyon. And then for the fourth painting, I pushed it further. And now the water is floor to ceiling, and it's like a waterfall, but it's also like light. And these shapes echo the shapes in the first painting. the big curving shapes of the first painting have come into this, and that could be a plant form, a leaf form, and still the dark and light of the inner canyon. So ideas that begin in one painting and taking them and pushing them further and further. Whether I'll do more in that series or not, I don't know. But for right now, that seems like it's complete. But that's how going from one idea to another. So ask me something, or
Is that end one part of the series as
no,
well?
that's part of the Inner Canyon series, and I did that as a commission. The woman who bought that commission gave all of the commission money to the Museum of Northern Arizona. So that was my gift to the Museum of Northern Arizona, because I had that big show there 2 years ago.
So
And so
it really is just gorgeous.
that's in a private collection. And the Inner Canyon series is analog to the Inner Life.
And you look like the Inner Canyon because you have this V, which you don't see, which is blue. And as you were standing and talking about that, I looked right at you and saw that blue for happiness that you were talking about. And I see the blue streak there. I see this blue in a lot of your work in that V. And so it's interesting that you personally put that together today.
And that is a very good point, because all art is autobiographical. In fact, everything that we do is autobiographical. Everything that we say, that we wear, that we eat, that we think, it's always about you. It's always about us, isn't it?
Subconscious, you know, just
Exactly.
looking at you.
And that's why we never, yeah, it is. It's always, you look like you. Yeah, you dress like you speak like you. It's always about us. Well, how could it be anything else? Yeah. I know, but anyway, but that's how we communicate with each other, because we bring that's how we connect, how we learn about each other, because we bring our uniqueness to each other, and yet we're all the same. The wonderful paradox, we're all the same, but we're all a little bit different. And it's true in art. Anything that I say about art, you can say the opposite and it could be true. So the paradox is always operating.
So when you have the feeling of the subject that you want to express, how do you go about it at first? Do you sketch, or do you just...
Okay, well, first of all, and I tell this to my students too, I have a passionate attachment to my subject matter, which is landscape, or whatever I'm doing, the figures, or I don't have any animal paintings in here, but so I'm passionately attached to whatever it is that I'm going to do, and in this case, then I was into the pour-over. So what I do is I go out in nature and I make like an 18 by 24 realistic 19th century painting of a place. And I do all my study, my homework, the shapes and the colors and the atmosphere and the plants and everything. And I don't use photography, ever. Photography is an art in its own right. I don't use photography and then paint from photos. Those small realistic paintings I take home and I just put them in the closet. And I approach the big canvas. I don't draw on it, I just start painting. But we all have so many ideas, we never run out of ideas. I have lots of ideas. It isn't that I go to a blank canvas and I'm blank and I just start doing that. But now in the summertime, the painting that I showed you that I just did, the only thing really conscious that when I started it was sort of this idea of, well, I'm kind of into sand dunes. And then the whole rest of the painting just happened. Yeah. Jean.
Visualize nighttime visions, dreams. I know I do, and often forget what I dreamt about, but
Sure.
you know, artists often, little bits and pieces may be part of a plan.
Well, maybe, because see, everything that we see, we're taking notes on. I have really good visual recall, as we do because we practice it. So I can paint from memory very accurately actual places. But I've been doing it all my life, haven't I? So I've had a lot of practice. And visual recall, I think that we can develop that. I also think we need to have the aptitude for it. I don't have any trouble visualizing whatever I want to visualize. Now, getting the painting to express and to look like and say what we intended, we have to be careful that we don't make up our mind too soon. And I call that getting out of our own way. And right now, I'm talking about inventive painting, really, truly personal, creative painting, where the painting becomes discovery as you go. But I know what I'm doing, right? You know what you're doing when you paint. I'm not a blank slate when I paint. Yeah, and so actually, as we paint more and more as the years go by, I think it's important to not solve our problems in the same old way. Make ourselves change. Sometimes I ask my students, do what you think is wrong, or make it ugly, or we go outside and we paint it upside down so that we get out of our ruts, because we can tend to solve our problems in the same way. But anyway, well, this painting over here, this big one with the horses and the people in. Well, I'm very interested in horses, and I love to work with the figure, and so I just wanted to combine them. The colors I derived from a lurid sunset in Sedona. It was over the top lurid, even more lurid than that. And so on purpose, I used some of those colors. And then this big red area, I wanted to have something in it and put activity in it. And so I just started laying in some horses and some faces and whatnot, because we humans are very dependent upon animals. And horses have helped create agriculture 10,000, 15,000 years ago. And people eat horses and are dependent upon horses, and we love horses for their beauty and for recreation. And so anyway, the necessity for dogs and horses and cats in our life, we humans seem to love cross-species communication. Some people have fish, some people have birds. Well, anyway, it's about all of us being the same. We're all the same. We're all made out of stardust. And it took 16 billion years for us to be standing here right now. All of our ancestors lived long enough so that we could be here. All of the horses that we know, their ancestors lived long enough to be out in the corral, in the same way with all life on the planet. And so I'm just interested in how things combine and work together. Now, I do have a series planned where I do the woman's body and the horse. I went to Ireland, and the white mare is one of the most powerful deities in Ireland. She can foretell the future. She brings compassion to the human race, strength and beauty. And I haven't gotten to that series yet. I just have done a few small things. But that's another series that I would like to do. But there are some men in this too. Well, let's let's go over to the figure paintings here. We'll walk around and we'll take a look at them. It's really interesting to me to have these paintings up because they have never been shown together before. And I think they've never been shown to anybody, because when I have shows, people just want to see the landscapes. And they don't even know that I do figures, but I love the figure. And I do work from the live model. In fact, in this painting, I had it vertical and also sideways, but I was working from the nude in the studio, and then when the model went away, I just started painting on it, and I thought, well, I think I'll turn it into rocks in the inner canyon. Like, this is very much watery, and the walls of the inner canyon and whatnot. Well, she didn't want to go away, so I just let the colors develop as they wanted to. And then the wing came in. Well, I love ancient mythology, and the wing means the winged oracle. And the winged oracle knows that birth and death are one, the two in the one, and the duality that many philosophies have. And also the little animal spirit came in too. So again, the animal that, we're animals, aren't we? And so we want to communicate with other kinds of animals in addition to other humans. Anyway, that did start from a living model, and I call it Psyche of the Inner Canyon. And so perhaps like the world egg. The world egg is in many mythologies also. Now this one I did not use models. This is called sandstone bodies. And I did that to show that our bodies are the same shapes and colors as the landscape. And in Sedona, down in the Red Canyons, that is very obvious. And I think one reason why the native people didn't do a lot of sculpture in Sedona is that the cliffs had all the figures and faces in it already. And they could just look at a cliff and have a person up there. So sandstone bodies. And then this one, this is way from what, the 60s. And this whole idea about, there's a figure in here, and is she going to let the bird go or hold it? It's contemplating the idea of personal freedom. Not at the expense of anybody, but is it even possible to have personal freedom? Probably the only place we have complete personal freedom is in our artwork. And I think that's why everybody should do some art. Not to sell, not to show. But when we make our own art or our own music or our own clothes or our own gourmet dinners or our own gardens, we're the queen and the king of that. That's the only place we are. And I think we need that to experience our personal power, not at the expense of anybody. It's the misuse of power that has harmed the planet. But personal power is how we relate to each other and how we get our work done. And this painting is called Before the Word. Now, first of all, it started out again from a nude model, just this central panel. And as I painted the nude, I didn't have enough room for her legs, but anyway, when I got home with the basic painting from the studio, the basic painting of the nude, I started painting on her, and again, it evolved into a mythological story like the Psyche of the Inner Canyon. And she started to have a headdress. And so I made another canvas so that I could complete more of the headdress. And I love Egyptian art, so it's the crown of Hathor, the goddess, the cow goddess in Egypt, who's the goddess of nourishment, again of beauty, of compassion, the beautiful cow that gives milk so that we can survive, or the mother that gives milk so that we have all survived. And then I gave her feet, so I made another little canvas. So that's why the painting is in 3 pieces. But again, it started from a living model, and then it turned into a statement about the ancient goddess cultures. This would be the womb, the generative center, and the sun and the moon disk both bring life to the planet. The snake knows the underworld, so it has wisdom that we don't have, and the snake has always been the symbol of wisdom, always. Again, the bird wing, the bird is the symbol of informing intelligence. That concept is 30,000, 60,000, 100,000 years old. We don't know how old these concepts are, but they're in prehistoric art, so that's why we know they existed. And so anyway, that painting, and I wrote a little story about it. That painting is about things that I'm interested in prehistory. The story of our culture is all in art from the very beginning. And then this is 1966, I believe, just a little immature figure growing. Maybe that's a guide. But the flower, again in prehistory, is a symbol of renewal. So to this day, we give flowers for every celebration or every crisis or whatever. And so that's 40 years old, at least, that painting. And the flower is up in the sky plane or the heaven plane. This would be the underworld. So it's like the growth of consciousness. And leaf shapes on the earth plane here, growth again. So my paintings are about ideas as well as they are about shapes. And then this one, in Egypt, in the tomb, I call this false doors. And in the tombs, there are 2 blank walls, doorways, blank doorways. And one has to do with the retrospective of our life, and the other, the afterlife. Well, and this is a very Egyptian kind of design about growth. But I just used a stylized male figure and female figure to include the duality in that painting. And the female shape may be pregnant, and then the mask. And I must have painted that painting 35 years ago. Anyway, this mask looks a lot like how my son looks to this day. He was a little boy when I painted it. It's as if I imagined how he would look when he was middle-aged. So I trust painting that way. That's why it isn't picture making. It's about the experience of being alive, even though I may use recognizable symbols. So I trust that process. And that's why I'm not a commercial artist, too. Now, I sell my work, so I get money for my work. So does that make me commercial? Probably. But I mean, I'm not a commercial artist in that I don't just take one thing and make it over and over again just to sell it. Now, that's not wrong to do that. There's no right or wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong. No right or wrong, good or bad. But my day job was always as a teacher. So I had the luxury of developing my art as I needed to. And curiously enough, my art has always sold, but that was never the motivation. To explore ideas is the motivation, is the drive. And so but we could just look at the other wall, and then that's probably enough to look at. The back. I came home, and in the studio, the experience I had doing the rocks in Walnut Canyon that are very much like the human body, then I just invented that painting from that experience. So that's pure invention. But it can still be considered an inner canyon painting, just a little bit, again, a slice of sky. Or it can be pure design. We enjoy pure design as much as we enjoy pictures of things. Like the clothing you have on is design, and our nervous system loves design as much as pictures. And of course, every culture has unique designs. And every culture has ideas about beauty, and they may not be the same in every culture. And this whole question of beauty, we have to have beauty. Beauty is irresistible. And it can be different with each person, what is beautiful, or in each culture. But in the presence of what we consider beautiful, we have momentarily, at least, a feeling of wholeness and wellness, no matter what our circumstances. So beauty, the experience of beauty is essential. A beautiful diamond ring doesn't have the beauty in it, does it? The experience is in us. So it's not in the thing, it's in us. But the thing can trigger it. And being outdoors, to me, is the ultimate beauty. Hiking, or petting my dog, or the beautiful horse, or being with a friend. So it's lots of things, isn't it? This painting, no one's ever seen this painting. I don't think anybody's ever seen I call it vortex, but nobody's ever seen that. You see a lot of ancient sites. And one day we took a little side trip into a town, and in a 450-year-old Catholic church, on the wainscoting, I saw this design. And that is not Catholic, that's Mayan. And here's that duality again in every culture. Birth and death, light and dark, summer, winter, male, female, on, off, same concept. And so I just love that so much. It was so clear that I made a whole painting about it. And this is part of the circle. And then there are other things going on too, but it does pick up here. So between the light and the dark, there's life. And I made it overwhelmingly strong. You could think of this as living on the earth plane, the earth, and that this is a concept. And you can see that as the sun if you want to, but it's more like the light or life and the unknown. But the importance of birth and death and the miracle of being here and the gift of being here, no matter how difficult or painful or how happy or whatever. But anyway, it's the overwhelming experience the importance of being aware. And now, you don't have to know what I'm thinking when I make a painting. The audience is free to have his and her own experience, own interpretation. I mean, actually, I could show that painting the other way around, too. But I intended it to be this overarching, overwhelming, the importance of birth and death, and then us being here. But so that came out of Guatemala. And in the colors of the jungle, or the wonderful bright colors of the clothing and whatnot. But anyway, that painting, I found that interesting, that came out of my experience from a real place. This is from a woman posing, and I like them because they're fresh and immediate, and who cares if it runs? And the way I make the contour of the body is by painting in the dark. So drawing and painting are the same. I can draw while I paint and paint while I draw. And then leave it. Everything is shape in art. Shape, color, all the elements of design, but shape and color are the two biggies. And ending with things that are more the kinds of landscapes that are familiar to people. And this is inspired by the monsoon skies that we have here in Arizona in the summer. And the sky is as important as the landscape, maybe even more complicated. And I call this Rift Canyon, and that's when the earth is pulled apart and makes a canyon. That's how the Verde Valley was formed, the earth being pulled apart, and then of course eroded a little bit. But I like to paint large size canvases because the landscape here is so large, and it just seems appropriate. Though of course I do small things too. But the Monsoon Sky series is a big series of mine. And it can be quite recognizable, and then more pure design. I painted this in 1996 for a 30-year retrospective, and I painted it on purpose because I'm asking myself in 1996, what's the direction of the next 30 years? And that's like one of those big parabolic mirrors that sees a big part of the landscape. So when I painted that painting, I did have something in mind, but as soon as a diagonal is put into a design, it makes it more dynamic. And so these are out of the Rush to Meaning series that have diagonals in them. And it's about, again, about the energy of being alive. So they're very dynamic. And you can see the influence of abstract expressionism, the gesture and slapping the paint on the canvas. So many of the landscapes are architectonic. The horizontal of the landscape is very soothing, and the vertical of the landscape is very stable. And then to come in with the diagonal, the energy of life. So all of that understanding and all of that imagery comes along. I never say, now I'm going to do this, now I'm going to do that. Long ago, I trusted the process. And so it's been a great privilege to develop that way. And I like my early work just as much as I like my later work. I don't think we necessarily get better as we get older. We certainly have a lot more experience. but we don't want to lose the freshness of youth either, and the courage and the risk-taking. So every once in a while I want to do that, to remind myself that I don't have to be safe. In order to learn something new, I have to take a risk. And so learning new things is a great adventure. I just happen to do it in painting. Other people do it in skydiving or skiing or whatever, or sailing, or in business, take risks in business and do very well. There's no one way to do it, to grow. There's every way that we can think of.